So I think one of the biggest things to look at is what causes addiction, or what are those triggers that lead to addiction. And one of the things that I mentioned was someone's susceptibility to stress. This is a huge trigger for people, right? So if you're an alcoholic, if you're addicted to cigarettes, if you are seeking that next cup of coffee, work gets hectic. Perhaps there's a tragedy in the family. And what does the person say? Oh, just one more drink to deal with this. Just one more time, one more. Well, I just need one more cup of coffee to get through the day. Stress is getting to that person and it's causing them to go seek that addiction. So CBD has been shown to promote a very healthy stress response, right? People who use CBD, generally speaking, report they are less stressed. And I'll say a caveat, not even less stressed, but much more capable of handling day-to-day stresses, or I would even argue in many patients we've seen life event stressors. They say, wow, I wasn't so worked up today when my power went out, or when I spilled coffee on myself in my car. I just wasn't as worked up. That's one way that we see it. We've also seen studies to show that CBD oil is beneficial in cutting back on those impulsive behaviors. So people who have an addiction to shopping, an impulse person who likes to buy, they act on impulse all the time. CBD seems to slow these individuals down a little bit and make them think more. That would be another thing. Of course, a lot of people develop addiction either because of or in light of anxiety. So CBD has been shown to be an excellent anti-anxiety supplement. This could work wonders for a lot of people suffering from addiction. I don't know many people who suffer from addiction who aren't reporting anxiety and depression. We know CBD is working wonders for people when it comes to anxiety and depression. Why does CBD work on all those levels? Well, if you haven't watched our podcast on the sleep, and if you haven't listened to the one on PTSD and anxiety, I would highly recommend that. It goes into more detail on this. But we know CBD positively influences the amount of dopamine in our brains and our dopamine receptors. So if CBD is promoting a healthy dopamine response, then in turn, yes, we're going to have the anti-anxiety effects. We're going to have the antidepressant effects. We're going to have this more controlled responses to external stimuli, like driving in the car. All of a sudden, oh, wow, I'm not craving that cigarette. CBD rewires the brain. So I'll just mention some brief things that have been seen. So of course, in our brains, we have the reward centers. In the same area in our brain, we have cannabinoid receptors present. That's one thing. CBD has been shown to reduce cravings for both THC, nicotine, and alcohol. Now, one of the neatest things about this, they actually did a study, I'll post this in the attachments when we're done, where they actually made mice addicted to alcohol and cocaine. And they said, okay, we're going to give someone a cocaine and an alcohol addiction with humans, very similar to see both of those addictions. And what they found was not only did alcohol and cocaine in the presence of the mice using CBD, that addiction seemed to diminish, but it diminished for up to 5 months following CBD treatment, even though the levels of cannabinoids present in the mice's blood actually reduced after only 3 days. So they expected to see, based on what we know about CBD, yeah, it's probably going to help with addiction. What they didn't expect to see was the amount of time that this control over addiction lasted. So that's really a fantastic thing about CBD is instead of getting addicted to something else like coming off of opioids, you're commonly prescribed Suboxone or methadone or one of those things, which is equally addicted to the drugs that you're trying to come off on, which, by the way, has the same side effects. Opioids are such a problem because we have receptors in our brainstem for opioids. And if you take too much, it will stop your breathing. It will depress your lung function. CBD, there's actually not receptors in your brainstem for it. So that's why you can't overdose. What a great option for people who are trying to taper off of opioids with their physicians, who are trying to fight addictions. I mean, how many of our veterans, have issues with PTSD, and alcoholism goes hand in hand with it? What a great thing. Now, the other thing that I'd like to emphasize is I mentioned with addictions, a lot of it has to do with problems in how our brain is storing those behaviors, how memories are being created surrounding that first cigarette, that first cup of coffee in the morning. It would appear that CBD can help to erase some of those memories, those feelings of, oh, I need a cigarette while I'm going on a long distance drive. It would appear that CBD can step in and have an impact on this reconsolidation of memories. Now, get this, if you sleep better in the meantime, of course, you're going to be thinking more clearly. When you sleep better, which we know CBD is good for sleep, you're going to have more impulse control. That's a proven fact. That's one thing. The second thing is, if you're taking CBD because you're addicted to some type of painkiller, it has anti-pain effects too, right? It's a strong anti-inflammatory. CBD affects the way nerves transmit pain to your brain. It dumbs down that pain signal message. So we're not only seeing its direct effects on the brain and addiction, but we're seeing it promote more sleep. We're seeing it promote less inflammation. So in my opinion, we're fighting addiction from more ways than one, like we are with so many other things in CBD, more ways than one, and in a very healthy way. This is something you can't get addicted to and you can't overdose on. I think the toughest thing for an addict is they don't want to take something else that they're just going to wind up getting addicted to. I quit smoking, but I started drinking. I quit drinking, but I started smoking. What if we had something where you didn't have to have that trade-off? Wouldn't that be something just phenomenal? Most people in my offices, I'd say we start around, which this can be high for some people, because if you have really bad anxiety, it might be a little high in some cases, but we start most people around 20 to 40 milligrams a day. I find that seems to be a good starting point for people. And then upward, if they're really having that breakthrough moment, maybe we'll tell them, take an extra 20 milligrams when you need to. But starting between 20 and 40 is pretty standard in our offices. Most people seem to do well with that. Yes, there's a few people who wind up needing less. And then I'd say upwards of 400 milligrams a day. Rare, but you can find reports where people are utilizing up to 400 milligrams a day to help. So there's a pretty wide range. Most people I find 20 to 40 milligrams, it really seems to help them out. And I think the farther you come, I mentioned this in a lot of our podcasts, people who have addictions, like everyone else who seems to have endocannabinoid system problems, have lower levels of CBD in their blood. As you come a long way, your levels should naturally start to rise. So you might need less of it. Why do you want to start slow? Remember, CBD is a biphasic effect. No, I don't think you would take too much and then wind up craving a cigarette, but start slow. Just in case you take too much the first time, it makes you a little more anxious. Easy solution, cut back. But 20 to 40 milligrams is pretty standard in my offices.